Hi, Marilyn Springers. I'm Eve Salazar, your teacher, and this is Tutorial 1. Tutorial 1, we're going to talk about side planking. And not just talking about side planking, but regular planking and push-ups. And the number one probably issue I hear, especially from women, is why can't I do push-ups? Or why are planks so incredibly hard? Okay? So first I'm going to talk about the anatomy, and I'm going to use our friend Bob here. This is our new friend Bob. I'm really enjoying having a skeleton in the studio. Can I just say I'm having so much fun with this? So Bob is going to help us talk about anatomy, and then we're going to move Bob to the side and get down on the mat, and I'm going to show you some ways to make both push-ups and side planks, the modifications, the preparations, and the progressions, so that if you're an advanced student, there's going to be something in this video for you as well. So let's start with the anatomy. Okay, so what muscles are involved in doing side planks and planks? Okay, so the one I want to talk about first is serratus anterior. And serratus anterior may or may not be a muscle that you're familiar with, but it's the muscles that line the fronts of the ribs, right in here. Okay, so if I get Bob's arm out of the way, you can see his rib cage right here, right? So the serratus anterior are muscles right here in the front of the ribs. It's the serratus, and it's anterior. So our anatomy tells us where the muscles are. So the serratus muscle is here, and anterior would tell you it's in the front of the body as opposed to the back of the body. So we also have serratus posterior, all right? And that plays a role too in stability. So we've got serratus anterior, which is typically very, very weak on us ladies, okay? We also have lats, right? Which are the big swimmer muscles that come down the back. Bob, don't fall over on me, okay? He's surprisingly heavy. He's really heavy. Anyway, we've got the lats back here, that big swimmer muscle, okay? And lats help to stabilize the shoulder girdle, as well as help pull. So in pulling motions, right, that's when we're using that big muscle down along the side of the body. Okay, so we've got the lats. We also have, so here are, if you hear me use the word scapula, it's just fancy for shoulder blades, all right? So here are your shoulder blades, and I'm going to do a more detailed tutorial on shoulder blades in the future, but I'm going to bring Bob a little closer. So we've got the shoulder blade here, and you can see how here's the top of the scapula, and then there's like this ridge up here. I don't know if you can see my finger going to this ridge. This is the scapular ridge. We've got the bottom corner of the scapula and the inner corner of the scapula. So you've got rhomboid muscles here, which help to pull the shoulder blades together and retract and protract the shoulder blades here. So rhomboids are in here, and a lot of times if we see someone with kind of a sunken spine and there's this big hollow between their shoulder blades because their head is maybe really far forward and the shoulder blades are jammed together because they're trying to help hold the weight of the head up, that's kind of a posture we get when we don't have the ability to eccentrically work the shoulder blades or create space across the back. Okay, so rhomboids. Also a little bit part of the push-ups, okay? And then we have the sits muscles, and the sits muscles are all of the muscles that help to hold the scapula on the back. And that could be another issue why push-ups are hard, right? So if we have a weak subscapularis, if we have a weak teres major, teres minor, I'm not going to go into the details of what each and every one of those muscles do. That would take hours. But you've got the muscles that hold the scapula onto the back, okay? I like to think of them as scapula suction cups. Okay, those are the muscles that help to not only hold the scapula against the back, but move the scapula. So this scapula doesn't move because it's frozen on a skeleton. But on a normal human body that has mobility, come on, get it together, Bob. As I would move the humeral head, the scapula would glide, right? So as we move the arms, the scapula has the ability to elevate, to depress, to retract, and to protract, and also to externally rotate and internally rotate. So there's a relationship too between the scapula and the sternum here, okay? So if you notice when people are really rounded in their shoulders, and this is an exaggeration, but occasionally we see these really exaggerated postures. If our shoulders have a tendency to be up and forward, okay, you can see how this is overstretched and this is kind of sunken. So the sternum is basically buried in the body, and the scapula have no ability to connect across the back. So if we don't have the ability to connect the scapula on the back, we also don't really have the ability to connect the shoulders down to the ribs and to engage through that serratus anterior. So in a sense, if our shoulders are up here, our serratus anterior has no hope of really firing, or it's so tight that we have to teach it how to reopen in order to teach it to function properly. So there's a whole relationship there between the sternum and the scapula on both sides, okay? Alternately, if we have someone whose mid-back is so tight that their shoulders are kind of pinned back, and they're so open here, but they're so tight here that they really, you know, their range of motion is a little more limited, or they're weaker there, there's an imbalance, right? There's an imbalance between the chest to learn how to work concentrically so that back can work eccentrically, or the back to work concentrically so the front can work eccentrically. So concentric basically means to work in a shortened position. Eccentric means to work in a lengthened position. So another little terminology lesson. Okay, so we've got serratus anterior. We're talking about the sternum, which also leads us to talking about the pecs. So you've got your pec majors, right? So in men, when you see men who are super buff, right? They've got, kind of have like not man boobs, but they kind of have those really well-developed pecs that look like kind of squares on their chest, right? So pec major. Pec minor really sits underneath pec major. It's a smaller muscle. But if you're someone who, when you lift your arm up really high, such a good assistant, Bob. When you lift your arm up really high, if you feel really tight through here, through that arm and chest, that's more than likely tightness in the pec major. And if the pec major is really tight or weak or shut down, pec minor is really weak, tight, or shut down, and usually it's a little bit of both. Rarely do you have someone who has a super strong pec major and their pec minor is just a mess, okay? So it's rare when one muscle is perfect and the neighbor is, you know, just not pulling his weight. There's always an imbalance, so one might be better than the other, but often there's an underdevelopment in the entire region that really needs to be addressed. And that's why Pilates always looks at the whole body, right? We're not trying to pick the body apart and work one tiny little muscle. That's very ineffective, because when you bring everything along, everything gets better. It's a good example for us as a society, right? So if we have an imbalance and we have people at the top doing really, really well, and we have people at the bottom that are barely getting by, right? We have a huge imbalance and we don't have a healthy society. Same with the body. If we have some muscles that are really overdeveloped and working too much eccentrically, and then we've got these guys here who are so tight and so shut down and so unable to effectively function, then we have a really ineffective movement habit and pattern, and there's a tax on that movement. And then that tax is going to be exploited over time, and that body part is going to develop an injury or stress or require a surgery ultimately to fix that structural problem. Okay, so we're moving on past the anatomy. One other area is the muscles of the arms. So let's say that your posture isn't so bad in your trunk, but you got little flimsy little arms like Bob here. He's got no muscles. So let's say your biceps and triceps aren't very well developed, right? And you're struggling with a lot of neck pain because maybe the arms aren't really pulling their weight. So we're going to do a couple of exercises next that will help to create some more strength in the arms and balance that relationship between the body's ability to organize the arm with the trunk. So, you know, there are a lot of men out there that can do bicep curls all day long. They're like, I can bicep curl 200 pounds. And you're like, great. What the hell does that even do? Right? Great, good for you. You might have this nice fluffy bicep, and who doesn't like that? I mean, come on, how bad can that be? That's nice to look at. So aesthetically, a nice puffy bicep, great, good for you. But does your arm function, and is it strong in the way that it organizes to your trunk, right? So that's ultimately what I'm looking at. I'm not looking at how nice your bicep looks, how big your bicep is, and aesthetically, do we want to have this perfectly toned body? Sure. But that's kind of that's the results. And if you're always chasing results, you're never really going to effectively change. But if you're chasing change, you're going to see results. So we want a balance between the bicep and the tricep in terms of strength, and also the wrist, okay? So I hear about a lot of wrist issues, and people come to me wanting to go, I want to be able to do push-ups. I get them on the wrist for like 2 minutes, and they're like, that's it, I'm done. So we have to develop strength in the wrists, and if there's a structural issue, we have to see that that's addressed. And in our society, we're really not working enough wrist stability and strength. and forearm stability and fingers. So when you're in your plank, you want to be pushing into that joint of that first finger. You want to be pushing into the joint of the thumb. You want to be pressing the fingertips down into the mat so that as you're using that hand on the floor, it's just like your foot. You want to really think of that hand and stabilizing in that hand. You don't want to have all the weight pressing right here into your wrist. That's not so good. And you see how many bones are in the wrist? There's a lot of bones in the wrist, and that's part of why I wanted to get this skeleton, so you guys could really see what's inside the body. You know, I could hold up my hand and show you my hand, but when you can really see all these bones, so if you're jamming all of your weight down into these bones, you're probably going to end up with wrist pain. If you are balancing the weight in the whole hand and you're distributing that weight equally in the whole hand, just like in the foot. Sorry, Bob, I need your foot. Oh, he's just being a little stiff today. Like, what do you expect from a skeleton, right? Okay, this should be easier than it is. I'm still learning how to work with Bob. You're not being very cooperative here. Let's see, if we loosen his femur head, that's a whole other lesson. Here's his foot, okay. Hi-ya! Okay, so you can see the foot. Do you see how big the heel bone is? I find this fascinating, right? So let's look at the foot. Let's look at the hand. What's so fascinating about this is you see all these bones in the wrist? You see all these bones in the foot and the ankle? But then there's 5 bones here, 5 bones here. Same with the hand, right? So we've got all these little bones in the wrist, 5 bones here, 5 bones here, all the way down. So the foot and the hand are very, very similar. And so the same is true. If you think of pushing all the way down in your wrist and you're not using your fingers, it would be like only standing with your heels and the rest of your foot is lifted off the earth. So just do that for a minute. If you're watching this video, stand up, stand on your heels, lift the whole rest of your foot up. Can you balance? And now walk around the room on your heels, right? So let's see if I can turn the camera. So it would be like walking around like this. So if you're only doing push-ups and all of your weight is in your wrist, it's like walking around on your heels. At some point, that's just gonna, create a lot of problems. So anatomically, we want to redistribute the weight evenly across the hand, and then that will work the arm more evenly, and it will help us connect to not only the front of the body, but also the back of the body and the sides of the body, right? So this side seam musculature system all the way down the sides of the body, we're going to talk about that more in the next tutorial. So I'm going to take a second, move Bob out of the way, and then we're going to get down on the mat. Okay, Bob, you just stay right there. Let's tighten your leg back up so it doesn't fall off. Okay, so we're going to move down to the mat here, and I'm going to show you some exercises for, if I had a whole camera crew, this would be a little more streamlined, but you got me and me. So here we go, figuring this out. Bada bing, bada boom. Okay, so coming down to the mat. I know, it's a little crooked. We're just going to deal with it, okay? If you're aesthetically thrown off by that, my apologies. So I've got 3 tools here that really help with planking. I'm going to move a little bit closer. So we've got the oeuf, okay, oeuf. We've got the Fletcher towel, and we've got the magic circle. And why do we use all these toys in Pilates, right? Toys, props, tools, whatever the heck you want to call them. Why do we use all of these? Because they generate different types of feedback for the body. So with the Fletcher towel, what that does is it teaches your scapula to have a relationship to the right and the left side of your body. Okay, so if you're working your Fletcher towel at home, good, keep doing that. That helps you to learn how to organize the shoulders on your back, and it teaches you that scapular, sternum, arm to trunk relationship. That's really the goal of the towel. If you don't have a towel, I really, really recommend this tool. Okay, it's the best for creating bilateral symmetry in the shoulders and the trunk, and that relates right back to your plank and your side plank. Okay, so that's the Fletcher towel. Not going to go into exercises with the Fletcher towel, that's for another tool, or video. Magic circle. Some of us call it the tragic circle. I know, insert applause, right? If you squeeze and release, and squeeze and release, you start to wake up these serratus anterior muscles. You start to feel how your arms connect to your anterior chain. So the Fletcher towel teaches us how to connect our arms, yes, to the front, but a little more to the back, the posterior chain. You definitely feel both, but it's really teaching the arms about the relationship to the back and the trunk via the back. The circle is a little bit more of teaching the body's relationship to the side seam muscles and to the anterior slings and chains of the body. So the circle asks us to connect in, whereas the towel we're pulling out. So that functionality of knowing how to connect in and knowing how to push out, that's your push and your pull, right? So if you push, you should pull. If you pull, you should push. Again, it's about balance. It's about bringing symmetry to the body by using a lot of opposition. So that's the circle. There's also a lot of exercises where we press down in the circle and you start to feel how the arm can connect to the ribs and the armpit. So circle, super, super tool for teaching you getting the muscles that you need to have strong in side planks and planks kicked on and working. And this is a great tool because you could even use it sitting in a chair. So let's say you're someone who you're like, planks are beyond me. Great, but those muscles still need to be awake and alive and functional. So you can sit in a chair and you can work on your circle. And that's the lovely thing. It can make this work accessible to someone even if they're in a wheelchair. Okay, so there's your circle. The oove. The oove is a great progression tool for side planks and planks. We're going to get to that in just a minute. So I'm going to come down to the mat. So let's say you're struggling with push-ups, okay? And we're going into side planks in class, but we're going to start on quadruped. So the first thing we need to do is teach the body how to organize with the wrist and the shoulder, right? So we're going to round the back, and then we're going to arch the back and feel the shoulder blades glide across the back, rounding and arching. Rounding and arching. Okay, and I'm feeling my shoulder blades moving across my back. And then press down and feel your spine push away from your arms. So that's really exercise one. That's where we need to start because you're going to be weight bearing in your wrists as you work your scapular connection to your body. And you want to feel these ribs stay connected. So what we want to avoid is this, okay? So if you're doing this, but your back is really arched, that's not so good. If you're doing this, but you're rounded the whole time, that's also not so good. So you want to find this more of a neutral place where you're very active in the front of your body. So another place to take that, once you're in quadruped, bend the elbows back away towards your hips, and then press the floor away. So to bend those elbows and just lower my body and push the floor away. And that's a great place to start push-ups, okay? Now what I'm not doing is I'm not like leaning way forward over my wrists. I'm not leaning back. So what I see a lot when I ask people to do this is I see them start to lean back. And that's really, you're escaping the exercise, okay? So when we start to make adaptations elsewhere, so really make an effort to listen to exactly what the cue is, right? If I wanted your hips to go back, I would say elbows and hips back, lean back over your heels. But if the cue is to really work the strength of the arms, you're going to hear bend your elbows, reach your heart for the floor, right? I didn't cue you to lean forward or lean back. So if you notice that your body is trying to make adjustments, that may be because it's trying to escape the work. Okay, turn this way so I'm not staring one direction the whole time. So we've got our little elbow bends here, and I'm keeping my spine straight. Lowering and lifting, great way to develop tricep strength and arm strength. So just those little tips down, kiss the floor, press back up. That's where you're going to start with push-ups. Now, if you're like, my wrist can't handle that, well then you need to just get onto hands and knees and do some wrist circles. Leaning side to side, leaning forward and back. You need to be on your hands and on your wrists every day, unless you have a structural reason and you've been told not to by a doctor, in which case you listen to that doctor, okay? But we do want to develop strength in the hands and the wrists, and remember to push those fingers down. Another one that we can segue is to start to reach a leg back, right? And I teach this in almost every class. And this is like a warm-up to bird dog. So bird dog is where we're in this position and I lift one leg up or I keep it down on the mat and I reach the opposite arm forward. Okay, and so now I'm teaching the body not only to organize over one hand and one knee, but I'm having to activate these diagonal slings and chains in the body. So that's where we really take it next, right? And you can start small. You can have one hand on the mat and bring it back in. Opposite hand and foot and bring it back in. Okay, so it can be this manageable. And then you can add to it. You can reach. And notice my back is not arching. I'm not tipping like that. I'm keeping my trunk engaged and back in. And my head is lifted. Head sinking is a big problem in push-ups and in planks, and even in quadruped. People will get here, their spine will look great, their head is down here. So put that chin in, lift your head up. Good, and then you can add on. You can reach up and bring it in. You can reach up and bring it in and touch. And reach back out. I leaned back a little. Did you catch that? I shouldn't have done that. Scoop. Whew, that's a little harder. Okay, so that's another way to build the exercise. So let's get into side planks now. So there's more there. There's always more. There's always ways to enrich that exercise. So there's more ideas to go. You might see more of those pop up in class, but that's a great place to start. If you need to develop that strength in your arms and the balance on the wrists and the knees. Okay, side planks. So I always recommend that you start on your elbow and your hand. And that's when we're cueing forearm. So be on your forearm, okay? And I'm gonna straighten both legs and stack the feet. Now, if that's uncomfortable for the hip, you can always put the top leg here, put the foot down and just take a little weight off your hip, okay? If you're immediately uncomfortable on the side of your hip, again, that's something where you just need to desensitize that a little bit. Sometimes we're so sensitive because we're not working those areas. If you need to fold up a second yoga mat, stick it under your hip, try that. Again, if you need to put your foot there, you put your foot there. Now, you're going to take your top arm and wrap it around your ribs. And then you're going to sink down, okay? And that should feel kind of easy. It feels kind of comfy, like, oh, I'm kind of chilling. And then you're going to pull your ribs up and push down into your elbow and lift. And at the same time, think of pulling your elbow towards your hip. And you will feel your armpit engage. In fact, you should be able to stick your finger into your armpit, and the whole armpit has kind of lifted up. It's like there's a little hollow dome in there now. That's what you want, because you want to feel those muscles engaged to support you. If you want a little extra work, you can bring this arm over your head, right? So we can sink down, and then we can lift up. And if we can sink down, and if you need to see this again, watch the video again, right? And lift up. All right, so I'm only going to do a few reps because I want to get as much in as possible. We're going to progress this. Let's say you're like, okay, that's manageable, that's easy, no problem. Okay, put one foot either down behind or down in front. Lift your hip. Hold yourself up. Get comfy here. Now, what I see a lot is that someone's hand is under their ear. That's going to put a lot of stress in your rotator cuff, in that shoulder. So get that elbow under your armpit. Lift up, and your head should go past your elbow, okay? Hold that and breathe. Get used to that. Get used to that weight in your elbow and lower it back down. Good, so to build some endurance and strength there, lift and lower, lift and lower, lift and lower. Do 10. Go to the other side, do 10. I recommend you do the weaker side a few more times than the stronger side. Progressing that, we come up onto the hand. Foot can stay in front, or I like it to go back. And we're going to do little lifts up onto the hand. Lift and lower. So side plank. Let's say we're in class and we're on our hands and our feet are stacked, and we're doing these fancy leg things. You can always break it down and just come up and come down, right? Or you can do that on your forearm and lift up and lower down, right? So there's your modification. If you want to progress that, feet stacked, okay? Lift up, hold it there, hold it there. Reach that arm up and over your ear and come back down. That one is a very challenging exercise. Please don't just try that before you've warmed your shoulder girdle up, okay? You may regret that choice. So let's say that's easy for you. It's time to introduce the oov. Okay, so you would take your oov, put it down on the old mat. Put your forearm on the oov, like so. Again, one leg straight, one leg bent. Elbows under your shoulder. Lift your hip up. Because now you're going to feel more instability under that arm. Right? So you're going to lift and lower, lift and lower. I'm going to go to the other side just so that side gets a little bit of demonstration. Could your oov go this way? So that it's in line with your forearm instead of like this? Sure, why not? Lift up. So now the balance is more this way and this way rather than that way and that way, okay? And that's gonna feel different. Let's say that's easier. Okay, great. Let's go to a forearm plank on both forearms. So I would turn my oov, hold on to the neck of the oov. Oh, you can't see that. Let's go here. Elbows on the oov. Hands hold the neck of the oov. You reach one leg back. You reach the other leg back, and you balance. Woo! You can see I'm working here. And then one knee down, other knee down. So there's always ways to make it harder, and there's even more ways beyond that. And if you need to bring that down even more and rehab that more, then, you know, planks may not be your thing in class yet. But don't give up on them. So don't give up on them, because here's what happens. Let's say we get older and we trip and we have a fall. And our arms are not developed, and our relationship of our arm to our back isn't developed. How are we going to get up off the floor, right? How are you going to pick yourself back up again? How are you going to get yourself up and off the toilet if you have a leg injury later in life? Being active means that sometimes we might bump ourselves, we might injure ourselves. That's part of living an active human life. If our whole system is really strong and we have these little injuries here and there, we're going to recover, and we're going to recover fully, and we're going to regain that balance. So we want to have established the strength in our body, especially in that upper hemisphere and that arm and shoulder relationship. That's what gives us that really beautiful posture, that confident posture, and it gives us stability. So for my equestrians, if you don't have the strength in your serratus anterior, you're not managing your arms in this position, and chances are you're pulling on your horse's mouth either too much, or you're not stable enough, and you're losing the ability of your body to be able to control your upper and lower hemisphere relationship, okay? So upper hemisphere is everything waist up, lower hemisphere is everything pelvis down, and we have a relationship there, and if one is a lot stronger than the other, again, we're gonna have that imbalance, and it's gonna make things like planks really, really hard. So I hope that helped. I hope that gave you some ideas for how to modify and how to progress in exercise. If you feel like you still need a little bit more help, now's the time to book a private lesson. So just always remember that a class, a group class, there's going to be something in there for you, and there's going to be something in there for someone else, and that move may not be your favorite move. If you've got knee issues or shoulder issues, it's really important that you get one-on-one with a teacher, at least every now and then. Right? So popping in once every 4 to 6 weeks for a check-in appointment. You know, if you can't afford ongoing privates, I totally get it. And now is a really tough time, especially for a lot of us. And that's why I'm creating these group classes, to make this work more accessible to everyone, regardless of their financial situation. So tell your friends about Saturday community class, and let them know that this is really a resource for them to be able to move and breathe with as little financial impact to their life as possible. I thank you so much for checking in and for being interested in what I have to say. You are my inspiration. Thank you. And have a great day. See you in the next tutorial.